Good morning. I'm here to bring you your daily mental health enlightenment, and today we are discussing guilt. So this is the third in a four-part series that I'm doing on the core issues that we have that drive our current mental health issues. So the first video was on acceptance and rejection. The second one was on abandonment, and today we are discussing guilt. Do you ever walk around just with this heavy feeling on you, this sense of burden, this sense of responsibility, this sense of self-blame, as if the things that have happened, that have gone on, are somehow your fault, where you take inordinate responsibility for things that are not your responsibility to take blame for? That is that feeling of guilt. So what is guilt? Guilt is the feeling that we experience when we have done something wrong, when we've committed an offense, such as a moral offense, or when we've committed a crime. What happens when guilt is implanted in us in childhood is that we then carry that guilt with us, and we perceive that guilt to be present in every circumstance that we're in, even if it's not. So instead of us feeling guilt when we've done something wrong, we feel guilt all the time simply because we feel as if we're guilty. We feel as if we have responsibility for something. We feel as if we should take the blame for what has happened. Okay, so let's look at some examples of how guilt displays itself. Have you ever woken up in the morning feeling horribly sick and made the choice, there's no way that I can go to school or go to work, and so you say, I'm going to call off today. And then after you call off, you lie in bed with anxiety, with knots in your stomach. Your heart is racing and beating because you are second guessing your decision to miss school or work. You are feeling badly about missing. You are asking yourself, were you really that sick that you needed to take off of work? You start to add up, well, how many times have I missed work? Is it okay that I'm missing work today? You start to contemplate, well, maybe there's some way I can go into work half a day. You start to worry about other people's perceptions of you, what your boss might be thinking of the fact that you had to call off, what your coworkers might be thinking about the fact that you had to call off, when everyone else seemingly may not even notice it because you haven't called off in 2 years. But that feeling of worrying that other people are perceiving you as being a bad employee is really coming from your own internal guilt about the fact that you had to take the day off. All right, another example of how guilt displays itself is when someone around you has an extreme reaction to something that has nothing to do with you, but you somehow put yourself into the equation and begin to take responsibility for this extreme reaction that they've had. Let's take the example of standing in a store line, and you're in line too, and you all are waiting because the cashier is the only one back there, and the transaction is going slow. You've been waiting in line all this time, but the person behind you flips out on the cashier. Why is this taking so long? There's no one else here that can help us. This is ridiculous that we've got to stand here for so long and wait for you. And the internal discomfort that you feel about their extreme emotional reaction makes you then begin to question, should I let them go in front of me? They must be in a rush. I only have a couple of items. I can wait. They must need to go. And so somehow you internally begin to take on responsibility for that extreme emotional reaction that that person is having that has nothing to do with you or with anything that you've done. A final example that I'll give is the feeling you feel when someone asks you for a favor, not a life and death favor, not a make or break you favor, but just a simple favor, and you're unable to meet that need. That feeling of guilt that you feel, feeling of being a bad friend, being a bad person, feeling of constantly letting people down by saying no. So if your friend says, hey, do you have some time tonight where I can call you and run this business plan by you? I have some ideas and just want to get your thoughts. Oh, it's no big deal if you can't. And even though it was presented in such a lighthearted manner, you feel responsibility to figure out how to make it work. And if you can't, then you feel bad. So all three of those things are very common examples of guilt that I see in my office in some variation or another. So now let's talk about the origins of guilt. So the origins of guilt come from childhood. The child had guilt implanted in them, and they were manipulated into doing things by guilt. They were made to feel horrible about who they were and stay in place and stay in line by guilt. So let's talk about 5 very common examples of how that happens in childhood. The first one is incest. The victim of incest who comes out and shares that they have been a victim of incest is usually not believed. They're usually blamed, and the question becomes, well, what did you do to make him or her want to touch you? How are you around here acting? Oh, you just want some attention. That really didn't happen to you. Or somebody wrestled or played with you and you want to make it like they touched you. So all the responsibility is placed back on that incest victim, and thus guilt is implanted within them. Another common way that guilt is implanted in a child is when one parent blames the absence of the other parent on the child. Yeah, your mom or dad would be here if you wasn't so bad, if you didn't make things so hard. You know, before you got here, we had a great relationship, and here you came and everything changed. You ruined things. So the parent's absence being blamed on the child implants guilt in that child. Another example is when a parent blames a mistake that they made on the child. Common example, you have a 9-year-old child who is trying to vacuum like their parent asked them to. And because they're 9, they're making mistakes. The parent gets upset. Come here, let me show you how to do it. You acting like you dumb and don't know what you're doing. And they grab the vacuum, and then they grab the cord, yank and pull the cord, and they end up hitting and knocking the vase off the shelf and breaking the vase. And they look at the child, look what you made me do, because you was in here acting stupid like you didn't know what to do. You made me break that vase. And then every time a new family member comes over to the house, they point out to the auntie, the grandma, the cousin, look what he did, look what his stupid butt did, made me break that. That is implanting guilt in that young child. That young child does not have the ability to discern, my mom is tripping. My mom got some stuff going on with her, and she is inordinately placing blame on me. That child simply eats that guilt. They take that guilt in, and then it lives with them. Another example is when children are blamed for their parents' unhappiness. You know, I had a lot of dreams before I had you. Do you know how much I do just to make sure your life is good? I'm not doing the things I want to do trying to take care of you. You know, I wish my life could be better, but no, I have you to take care of. So that is implanting guilt in that child. And then the last example comes from the sisters and brothers of that child. Them telling that child, you know, before you got here, everything was so much better. Mom and dad were more happy. Our family was better. Or a child saying, you know, if mom and dad didn't have to do this and that for you, there would be more time for them to do things for me or do things for themselves. So again, guilt being implanted. We've got to be so careful about what we put in the spirits of our children, because it does implant issues, core issues that stays with them. Okay, I want to really quickly just make the correlation between guilt and defensiveness. Because a person who has issues of guilt constantly walks around with the fear that they are going to mess something up or do something wrong, they are constantly on the defense. So when someone mistakenly accuses them of doing something they didn't do, immediately they pop off. For instance, say you're in a work meeting and there's a sign-in sheet, and now the sign-in sheet is lost, and one of your coworkers says, "Oh, I think Tina was the last one with the sign-in sheet." And Tina blows up, "I didn't have the sign-in sheet. I wasn't even in here when the sign-in sheet got started. I walked in 10 minutes late. I walked in behind you. I didn't even sign the sign-in sheet. You putting this on me?" And the coworker is like, "I didn't mean to say Tina. I meant to say Tammy. I'm sorry." But because you walk around with guilt issues inside of you, that's where that defensiveness and aggressiveness comes from. All right, so that is the video for today, and I hope that you all will watch tomorrow, the fourth and final part of the series of the core issues that underlie our mental health issues. Tomorrow we will be discussing trust. So, what's the message? To think about mental health in a different way. A way that helps you to understand that your childhood issues just may be the reason behind your current mental health issues. And I'll see you tomorrow.